All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. My name is Brian Kennicott. This is for my speech class, and here are my speaking notes here. So imagine a world entertaining the idea of God was no longer allowed, or people just decidedly didn't practice it anymore. They no longer wondered where they went after they died. What would you think of that society? Would you say that that society was ignorant? Maybe feels like a horse with blinders on? What I really wanted to find out through my research was whether agnostics were a moral worldview to institutionalize. How do you feel about theistic and non-theistic arguments making their way into politics, for example? I'm a logic student this semester, and I wanted to use propositional logic to further understand agnostics' argument. With the help of some scholarly resources, I was able to reach some new conclusions that I personally feel are unbiased, and I'd like to present to you today. Agnostics do have a logical argument. It's logical to say that if you don't have enough evidence, you can't make a formed opinion. But I wanted to get to the root of that view and kind of understand it more in greater detail, what the moral implications of that argument are. Do they present a moralistic fallacy? It's a long, heated topic throughout history, the freedom of religion and the separation of church and state. Agnostics pose a new argument to the discussion, and I question whether it's moral to institutionalize a view that's societally undecided. During the Democratic debates in 2020 this year, the Freedom for Religion Foundation ran an ad with Ron Reagan as their spokesperson, a Democrat and son of Republican President Ronald Reagan. He states, "Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell." I thought it was very humorous, and it was the first time I had seen an ad of its kind. I later learned that the Freedom for Religion Foundation is a non-profit organization in Wisconsin that believes in advocating the separation of church and state in education in non-theistic beliefs and views. They have sent over 500 complaint letters to public schools in opposition of Trump's response, saying that prayer in public schools is okay and that it's that they're practicing their First Amendment right. In an NPR article, co-president of the foundation, Annie Gaylor, stated it's about proselytizing to a captive audience. Pew Research studies show in 2020, this year, that nearly half of Americans believe that the Bible should have influence on US laws. 2/3 of Jews believe it should not, and self-described non-theists, 3/4 of those of the population believe it should not as well. Majority views like these have the capacity to shape sociological perspective of our cultures and guide future generations of Americans. I wanted to understand this subgroup of skeptics a little bit in greater detail. Do they present a moralistic fallacy? They are considered a philosophy, not a religion, similar to Buddhism or the spiritual effects that people get from practicing yoga. I wanted to use propositional logic to further understand their argument. Propositional logic is an algebraic method of deducing an argument to its core truth values using symbols and dates back to the ancient Greeks. Boiling down the agnostics argument to its core elements could help us see its rationality and whether or not it's moral. A famous example of propositional logic being used to understand agnostics' claims was written in William James' essay, the will to believe. William James was an 1800s philosopher, and the first to institutionalize a psychology course in college education in the late 1800s. He stated, in regard to agnosticism, it is a rule of thinking which would absolutely prevent me from acknowledging certain kinds of truths if those kinds of truths were really there, and it would be an irrational rule. Try to visualize a world practicing strong agnosticism. Is that healthy for debate? Is it a healthy worldview to institutionalize? Or could it limit our critical thinking skills? According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, William James's essay, Will to Believe, in which he states that, quote I just stated, that can best be represented in propositional logic through this equation, which states, for all persons S and propositions P, if S believes that P is just as likely as not P, then it is impermissible for S to believe either P or not P. I believe that's a rational argument. Not having enough evidence to make an educated decision is completely acceptable. But I would also argue that suspending judgment complicates the issue. Using strong agnosticism as an example, I can paint a successful argument against agnosticism. Imagine a world that no longer contemplates whether there is or isn't a God. This is a world that is decidedly practicing strong agnosticism. Professor of philosophy at Vanderbilt University, Clint Dorr, in his book Agnosticism, Religious Studies, states, whenever there is given evidence that either proposition P is true and also evidence that is false, the most rational thing for anyone that knows that this is the case is to suspend judgment with respect to P. I would argue that agnosticism kind of sweeps the issue under the rug. There's nothing left to be gained from having that perspective. In the Freedom for Religion Foundation ad, Ron Reagan says that he is alarmed by the intrusion of religion into our secular government. There have long been examples throughout history of oppression against people for their religious beliefs. And scholars would unanimously agree that the Bible had influence in the writing of the Constitution. Agnostics present a valid, consistent argument, but I wanted to follow this breadcrumb trail to its proverbial end. And I came up with my own equation, being a logic student. And that could be represented in this equation here, which simply states, not being agnostic is true if and only if there is a God, or there are multiple gods, or there is no God at all. So the argument is absolute in its propositions. Agnostic's argument is therefore inconsequential to the two dominant arguments, that there either is or there isn't a God. Refer back to that analogy of a horse with blinders on. This is what I believe is missing in agnostic's worldview. I believe exercising our imagination should not be impaired by beliefs that deter it. At its core, agnosticism has the capacity to produce and promote ignorance that can lead to apathy and a lack of empathy for those that have different belief systems, and that would constitutionally break the First Amendment. In conclusion, the agnostic argument is ultimately not an adverse approach to debate, nor exercises our critical thinking skills. Freedom from religion has been a long-heated topic that has caused wars and total populations to flee their countries. The argument that agnostics pose is ultimately whether ignorance is the highest road on the path to world peace. I implore you to broaden your depth of understanding in regards to philosophy, theistic and non-theistic beliefs. Explore what people believe and why they believe it. Look at those arguments logically without bias to make informed decisions based on reason and logic. Reference history, it can be your greatest teacher on subjects like these. Be aware and respectful of different views. If you'd like to explore Freedom for Religion Foundation, their website is ffrf.org. Or if you feel led to seek the guidance of a local religious institution and their religious leader. Never force your beliefs on others. Your voice matters, and always be respectful and mindful of other beliefs. Thank you very much.